Well, Merry Christmas again, everyone. Did we have a good Christmas? We did. Excellent. I have a question for you this morning, and I'm not going to ask you to elaborate or anything, but I'm just curious by show of hands, how many of you this year received a Christmas gift that was like, it was a game changer for you? Anyone? You got like, I got a, yeah. You know what I'm talking about when I say a game changer. This year for Christmas, I did not get any game changers. I got great gifts. No complaints at all, but none of them were like, oh, this is a game changer. This is going to change the way things are from here on out. Like, for example, had I gotten a snowblower, which I do not have, that would have been a game changer for me. It's fine. I don't mind shoveling the driveway, but that's kind of a game changer. I was thinking, just thinking about my life and what would it be a kind of a game changer moment for me. And one of the things that I thought of that happened not all that long ago, I guess, was our children are now old enough that we can leave them home alone for a bit of time. And that is a game changer. If you're not there, hold on, because that time's coming, and it's kind of awesome. I have a very distinct memory when my kids weren't quite old enough to trust them to be home alone. And I had loaded up the van with the recycling. I had just a bunch of cardboard. I needed to run over to the recycling center and just drop it off. And we live literally 2 minutes from the recycling center. I could just run over there, drop it in, be back. And I had the van loaded, and I remember kind of freezing in the house. And I kind of looked at the kids, and I kind of looked at the van, and I went, I just can't do it. I really want to get this errand over with. I just wanted it to be done, but I'm not comfortable with that yet. But now I am. My kids are a little bit older, and we can trust them to be home, and it's awesome. So when I have to run to the store, or I have to run over here to the church for something, or meet with somebody, or have worship practice or something, it's like, hey guys, I'll be back in a little bit. And I always leave them with these words of wisdom. Don't burn the house down. Right, Noah? I always say, hey, I'm going to be gone for a few minutes, maybe an hour or whatever. Do me a favor, and don't burn the house down. And they, yep, got it, Dad. And oftentimes when I come home, I'll make sure to thank them for not burning the house down. Appreciate that. Maybe so that was a game changer for us. Maybe for some of you, you're empty nesters. You had children, they're grown now, they're off on their own, and that was a game changer, right? No more car insurance to help pay for, no more clothes to have to buy for them, no more mouth to have to feed. They're gone now, and it's like, woo, game changer, okay? Or maybe for some of you, it's sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. You were married, and you're kind of just doing your own thing, and you had all the freedom to go and do whatever you wanted, and then a little one came along, and that was kind of a game changer in the opposite direction, right? We don't have that freedom to just get up and go and do the things that we want to do. Webster's dictionary would define game changer this way: a newly introduced element or factor that changes an existing situation or activity in a significant way. Simply put, they are moments in our lives that redefine an outcome. Now, for some of you today, this might be a newly introduced element that has the power to change you. And for others, it's my prayer that for you, it will be maybe sort of an aha moment that will redefine an outcome for you. I know those are big hopes, but let's dig into our primary text this morning. And it's found in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. And it's just a short proverb, and it says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. This one proverb contains 14 game-changing words. But the ones that I think are the most fascinating are the first 3 words: above all else. The scripture is referring to our spiritual heart, which is quite different than our physical heart, obviously, our physical blood-pumping heart. But the similarities there are too hard for us to ignore. With a physical heart, you can't see it, but it's essential to our living. It works behind the scenes to keep your body running. You can't live without a heart. Now, on the contrary, you can live without a limb. You might be familiar with a man named Aaron Ralston who was hiking in Utah, and his arm got pinned underneath a boulder, and he was stuck there for several days, and he came to the realization that if he had any hopes of living, he was going to have to use the tools on hand, which were a pocket knife. And he was going to have to amputate his own arm if he was going to have any chance at living, and he was successful in doing that. Luckily, he's alive with us today, and he is able to survive minus one limb. There's another person named Anthony Robles who was a wrestler for Arizona State, and he actually won the NCAA Division I championship as a one-legged wrestler. We can live without a limb, but we can't live without a heart. And when it comes to our spiritual life, the heart is the game changer because it determines the course of your life. Our bodies are very complex, but there are some very predictable happenings within the human body. For example, for those of you who eat sausages like an Olympic sport, you can keep eating them, but sooner or later you're going to have to visit a doctor or a morgue, right? We just can't do that forever. There are some pretty predictable things that will happen if we do that. When a heart is bad or diseased or unhealthy, it reveals itself in noticeable ways. Shortness of breath, lack of energy, numbness, a tightness in the chest, maybe even indigestion. These are specific signs of an unhealthy heart. I'm curious this morning, by a show of hands, who has had their heart checked or evaluated or operated on or possibly even revived? Anyone? Yeah, I see some hands. A couple of years ago, I had this very odd sensation. And it just, the only way I could describe it was that it felt like somebody rather forcefully just was pressing a finger into my heart. It didn't hurt. It wasn't like painful, like a wincing pain, but I would just feel this pressure. And I shared that with my primary care physician, and she looked at me very strangely, like she had never heard of that before. I don't know what to tell you, but this is what it feels like. And so she ordered a stress test, and so I went to the hospital, and they ran the stress test on me. I was very relieved as I was finishing up the stress test. The doctor was reading my results, and he looked at me and he said, "Who ordered this stress test? Because everything here looks perfectly normal." And it was such a weight lifted off me. I was like, I don't know, but when it comes to the heart, those are things we take seriously. For those of you who are a little bit older, when we're younger, we think we're invincible. We think nothing bad could ever happen. And that's kind of how I felt. I thought, I'm going to live forever. I'm healthy and I'm active and everything's fine. And then as soon as I had this slight odd feeling, I woke up a little bit. I went, well, hold on a second. I think maybe I'm mortal. I think maybe I need to take this seriously. So I had to go get it checked out. With your spiritual life, if you have a weak spiritual heart, it will also show symptoms. Not shortness of breath, but you will have a shortness of love. You won't lack energy, but you will lack compassion. There won't be a tightness in your chest, but there will be a tightness of your generosity. You won't feel a physical numbness, but you will be numb to God's presence. And if you really want to evaluate the spiritual condition of your heart, just watch what happens when things don't go your way. When pain appears and when pressure shows up, what heart symptoms do you reveal? There are two ladies that I know of who I have great admiration for. One went through a very, very ugly and difficult divorce. And it was hard, it was trying, it was painful. And I don't mean in any way to minimize it. It was a very difficult situation for her to go through, and she did her absolute best to redeem that marriage. But her husband decided he was going to move on, he was going to divorce her, and she handled that with such love and grace. It was amazing to watch as an outsider. And when she got put under pressure, the character of her, how healthy her heart was, shown. Another lady that I know of just this past week lost her younger brother who passed at a very young age. And again, not to minimize her situation at all. She is hurting. She is grieving. This is a very trying time for her. But she is demonstrating what a healthy spiritual heart looks like as she navigates this difficult experience. And when Jesus spoke of the heart, he used a lot of game-changing words. Let's take a deeper look as we look at Matthew chapter 15. We'll start with verses 1 and 2. Then some Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus from Jerusalem and asked, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat." Now, a Pharisee was someone who was distinguished by the strict observance of religious laws. The context of this scene was a common scene for Jesus. The religious leaders were trying to catch Jesus doing something wrong so that they could discredit him. But Jesus didn't break God's law. Jesus didn't break God's law, but he didn't keep human-made rules that those religious leaders had created to keep people from breaking God's laws. So essentially what these religious leaders did, these Pharisees, they said, well, this is God's law. This is what God expects of us. And so to ensure that we don't break God's law, we're going to just add extra laws. They were like speed bumps or stop signs along the way. So if we can keep these laws, then there's no way we'll ever break God's laws. But what happened in the process, it's kind of a good idea at heart, but what happened in the process is they deified these man-made laws or traditions. They made them as holy as God's law. Now, back to the Pharisees' hand-washing question. In the Old Testament, God instructed the priest to stay ceremonially cleansed. And every time the priest ate, he was to wash his hand from the tips of his fingers all the way to his elbows to ensure that he didn't put anything impure into his mouth that might defile him. By this time, the religious leaders decided that everyone should do that, not just the priests. And so they came up with a tradition of ceremonial hand washing for everyone. But Jesus didn't go along with these human traditions. He said, people, you're missing the big picture. You're missing the forest for the bar of soap. You're focusing on clean hands when you need to be focusing on clean hearts. Now watch this. Jesus continues in Matthew chapter 15, verses 7 through 9. And he says, "You hypocrites. Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules." The word hypocrite here has its origin in Greek theater. It's describing a character who wore a mask. And so essentially what Jesus is saying is, you guys are spiritual phonies. You pretend that God is near, but you're distant. Empty ritualism does not bring intimacy with God. And then he gets to their hand-washing protest. In verses 17 and 18, Jesus says, "Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them." In your spiritual life, it's not dirty hands that will defile you. It's what comes out of your mouth that defiles you. And why? The answer brings us to our game changer. What comes out of your mouth was birthed and grew in your heart. When you say something hurtful or mean or racist or sexist, and then you say, "Oh, I didn't really mean to say that," what's closer to the truth is, I didn't really mean to say that out loud. You've all seen this before. Someone acts surprised and they say, "Well, I don't know where that came from." But God says, "I do. It came from your heart. You just got really good at covering it up. But I know what your heart really looks like." See, we can fool others all day long, but God is never fooled. In Hebrews chapter 4, verse 13, We read that nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give an account. God sees everything. God sees our hearts. Now, continuing on in Matthew chapter 15, verses 19 and 20. Jesus says, "For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person. But eating with unwashed hands does not defile them." That's quite the list, isn't it? From the heart comes evil thoughts. Murder flows from anger stored in our hearts. Adultery flows from lust stored in our hearts. Theft flows from greed stored in our hearts. Lying from deception stored in our hearts. And slander from jealousy stored in our hearts. And it's very clear that God is teaching that the game changer is our hearts. It is command central for our actions. I've been doing youth ministry now for almost 20 years, and from time to time, a parent will talk to me about some struggles they're having with their child, and they might say something like, "Hey, my child's really using a lot of bad language. We need to fix that. How can we fix that? How can we make that stop?" Or, "My kid's drinking. How can we stop that?" Or, "My kid is hanging out with the wrong people. We have to fix that. We have to figure out how to make that stop." And I want to say, you want behavior change, but really what you really want is a heart transplant that only Jesus can perform. It's a heart issue. These actions are merely symptoms of a heart that needs changed. Now, hear this. God is not a glorified etiquette instructor. Let me say that again. God is not a glorified etiquette instructor. He's not looking for behavior modification. He's looking to change our hearts from the inside out. Because the inner life of a person is a big deal to Jesus. Then Jesus continues in Matthew chapter 23, verses 25 through 28. And he says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness." Now that doesn't sound like the Jesus that you heard about in second grade Sunday school, is it? We saw pictures of him picking flowers and holding children. But in biblical times, tombs were regularly washed and cleansed to make them stand out. They were spectacular. They were ornate. And these religious leaders who looked so good on the outside were actually dead on the inside. I've always thought it would kind of be fun to do a sermon titled "People Who Need to Be Slapped." Now, I don't mean like, injured or not beat up or in any way, but, just sort of a, what were you thinking kind of slap. Like people who wear their Bluetooth earpiece to a family dinner, or people that push their dog in a stroller, people that wear Crocs, people that like cats. Okay, I know I pushed it too far with that one. But this is kind of what Jesus does to the Pharisees. He kind of gives them a verbal, "What are you thinking?" slap. And why was Jesus so heated about this? And here's why I want you to get this so badly. It's because Jesus knew that an unclean heart wreaks havoc in our lives and within relationships. So let's get back to you. Is there any hope for the human heart? I think we find our answer in Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 26. Ezekiel writes, "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh." And so I think the answer is yes. In this verse, the prophet Ezekiel was writing to the nation of Israel who was in exile. They were no longer living in the promised land. And he was giving them hope for their future. And he was describing the character and the capabilities of God. And this kind of theology is all over the New Testament. A new, transformed, changed heart is what God does. So yes, there still is hope for the human heart. Now, here's the key. You don't have to change your heart spiritually. God does that. He does what's impossible. And then in cooperation with his Holy Spirit, we get to do what's possible. It's teamwork. It's a partnership. It's a process. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 6, we read, "Because you are his sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father." God's Spirit is at work within, confirming that you are adopted into God's family. There's a loving, divine, paternal relationship happening. That term Abba is a term of endearment. It means daddy. And so it's kind of like God is saying, I've got this, kid. I've got the big stuff. I'll do the heart surgery, and you do your part. Now, let's get practical. What does it mean for us to do our part? Well, let me ask you this. A few primary symptoms of spiritual heart disease are anger, greed, and jealousy. How many of you would say you struggle with anger, greed, or jealousy? Okay, for those of you that didn't put your hands up, you can resonate with lying. It's something that we all struggle with because we're all born with this sinful nature. And we all have this heart work that needs to be done. And so I want to share with you a couple of thoughts. The first, for those that maybe struggle with anger, I would encourage you to learn to forgive. Now, again, we offer this up to God and we say, God, I need you to help me with this. I need you to change my heart. I need you to help me to learn how to be a person who forgives. And God will do that heart change. But in the meantime, we have to do our part. And so we need to step out and just start forgiving people. Now, you might respond and say, yeah, but it would be insincere. It wouldn't be authentic. It wouldn't be heartfelt. And I'd say, that's okay. We need to just say, these are people that have offended me. These are people that make me angry, and I'm harboring this anger within, and I just have to say, I forgive you. Even if I don't feel like it, even if it doesn't feel comfortable, I'm going to forgive, and I'm going to ask God to do that work in me so that as I grow in my faith, I'll become a person who can more easily forgive. Maybe it just starts by saying it, even if you don't believe it, and even if it's a struggle, we're just going to say, I forgive. For those that maybe struggle with greed, you need to give. And again, the same principles apply. We're going to ask God, help me with this greed. Help soften my heart. Help me to become a person that's more generous. And in the meantime, you need to find some way to give. Maybe small baby steps at first, but find some way to give of your finances, or give of your time, or give of your talents. Maybe it's just in some small way at first, but we're praying, God, change my heart so that I can be the kind of person that can give generously and cheerfully. And finally, for those of us that maybe struggle with jealousy, we see other people who have nice things, or they're able to have nice experiences, they're able to go on nice vacations, and it makes us jealous. We need to offer that up to God. We need to ask him to soften our hearts, to change our hearts, and we need to celebrate the successes of others. If someone you know has bought a new house or bought a new car, has some nice thing, or is able to go on some nice vacation, celebrate that for them. And that, again, it might be difficult, and you might go, but I'm still jealous. And that's okay. You just need to say, hey, tell me about your vacation. That's really cool that you got to do that. So give me a ride in your new car. Can we go check it out sometime? I want to celebrate that for you. And in the meantime, God, change my heart so that I can grow in my faith and be the kind of person that celebrates, that forgives, and that gives. I think there's so much comfort in knowing that God does the impossible. That's not up to us. We don't have to do all of the work. We don't have to figure it all out and then show up to God and say, okay, God, I've solved all of my problems. Here I am. I'm perfect. I'm good. Now I've changed my own heart. Now you can be impressed with me, because that will never, ever happen. We just have to call on God and submit ourselves to him. And that can be a scary thing, for us to expose ourselves, to be laid bare before God and say, if I'm honest, God, I'm angry. I'm greedy. I'm jealous. And I struggle with whatever it is that you struggle with. But if we sincerely want to grow in our faith, we have to lay ourselves bare before God and say, this is the problem, and I need it to be fixed. You've also heard the saying, when there's some kind of issue, you've heard someone say, we can't just fix this. What do we say? We have to get to the heart of the issue. This is the heart. This is the game changer. If we can fix this, then all of these other things will fall into place. If you don't know Jesus this morning, if you've never laid yourself bare before him and said, I've got an issue and I need you to come in and fix it, we want to extend that offer. He's calling you. He wants you to come, to give your heart to him so that he can do his impossible work in you. And in the meantime, we do what's possible so that we can continue to grow in our spiritual journey. If that's you this morning, if you have some life change that you need to make, we invite you to come forward this morning as we stand together and we sing our song of invitation.